Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for From Admin to Architect. Thank you for joining us during your lunchtime, which is even more significant, right? My name is Shannon Howe. I'm a solution architect at Tata Consultancy Services, and I'm joined by one of my friends and role models, Genevieve Aragon, but I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself.
Thank you, Shannon. Hello, everyone. My name is Genevieve Aragon. I am a technical architect and founder of Escapist Reality, a Salesforce consulting firm. But we'll talk more about ourselves in just a minute. But first, for the interest of the clock watchers, let's review the agenda.
So today we're going to talk very high level about women in tech. I'm going to show you a statistics slide that's going to make you maybe want to put away your lunch. Then we'll talk about architects in context. We'll talk about our path to architect, your path to architect, and then we'll give you some resources for your journey. So that statistics slide that we talked about. So we have work to do. According to the National Center for Women and Information Technology, women make up 16% of the computing science bachelors in 2015, 26% of the computing workforce in 2016. Of that, 3% were African American women, 5% were Asian women, and 2% were Hispanic women. To add insult to injury, Deloitte found in 2016 that U.S. women developers earn 79 cents to the dollar that men in the same roles earn, and 25% of women in the United States in IT roles feel stalled in their careers. It's even worse internationally, where 45% of women feel stalled in their careers. It's a major bummer, right?
But besides being absolutely horrible, why is this important?
So, we stole this from Trailhead. Companies that are more gender diverse are 15% more likely to outperform others, and those which are ethnically diverse are 35% more likely to outperform others. Don't worry, we linked the Trailhead in our resource guide of our deck, but this is pretty significant.
And while we probably don't need to convince those of you in the audience why this is important, sadly, there still are a lot of people who do need to be convinced. So if you find yourself in those conversations, we have put together some links to some of our favorite articles and studies to help prepare you for those conversations.
It's always good to prepare yourself by arming yourself with knowledge and a sword.
Obviously, Shannon and I like to be prepared. It's one of the traits that helped us to become architects.
Speaking of architects, so we said we were going to talk about architects in context, and what that means is we're going to show you a list of all the different architect titles that are out there in the wild. So this is not a complete list. This is just a few of the most popular titles that I've seen on LinkedIn. But for the purposes of our conversation today, we're focusing on the two most popular in the Salesforce ecosystem, and that's going to be the technical architect and the solution architect.
And while you might think, based on the title, that technical architect is the cooler of the two, there's actually a lot in common between both technical architects and solution architects. Both technical architects and solution architects need to have a deep understanding of the Salesforce platform. They need to know what it can do out of the box, how it can be extended, and where it might not be the right fit. In addition to needing to know the technical side of it, they need to know how to communicate that to others, both technical and non-technical people, the business stakeholders, the executive sponsors. So architects spend a lot of time in meetings. They're also responsible for putting together the system and solution designs. They produce a lot of documentation. And to do all of this work, they are constantly learning and consuming a lot more documentation.
So we have a lot in common, but there are a lot of things that Genevieve does as a technical architect that I would not do as a solution architect. And so it's time for us to talk about what makes me special, #millennial. Solution architects are typically engaged early on, sometimes even pre-sales. We document the desired business capabilities of our customers, be them internal or external customers. And then we'll refine them to really understand what the customer truly needs so that we can build maps of the current state system architecture and finesse those maps so that they are structured to show the future state architecture. So now you know a little bit about what solution architects do.
Well, before we move off to the technical architect, I do want to spend a little bit more time sort of highlighting an element of solution architects I think is really important. Because solution architects engage with customers usually when they're most excited, but also when they're most scared. And a lot of people are putting their careers on the success of a project. And it falls on a solution architect to often guide them through the process, through the ideation, through designing of a solution that will work, and ultimately setting them up for success. So solution architect is a critical member of the delivery team.
So it's really refreshing to hear from a technical architect that they see and understand the value that we bring. There's always a really healthy friction between strategy up front and delivery post handoff, right? So I like to try to get my technical architects engaged early on so that when it's time for me to hand off my baby and my dream, they can carry it through to the delivery and to the finish line.
And so let's talk a little bit about what happens next at the handoff. So technical architects do often get engaged at the project kickoff, though as Shannon mentioned, if the solution architect needs to understand things a little bit deeper on a technical level, they can bring them in earlier. But the technical architect is responsible for consuming the current state and future state roadmaps that the solution architect and the client have put together. And they're responsible for identifying any risks that might come along with the planned implementation. Not only do they need to identify the technical risks, they also need to design the remediation strategy to remove those risks or reduce them, or if they're unable to be removed, to escalate if there are project blockers based on the plan. The technical architect sets all of the technical policies of the project, and they're also the point of technical escalation for the entire project team, whether it's a developer, a business analyst, a project manager. All of those questions on the technical side of things roll up to the technical architect. So ultimately, technical architects are responsible for ensuring that what we are delivering meets the customer expectations.
So now that we've talked about technical architects, and everybody here probably wants to become one, I guess we'll show you the CTA pyramid. So this is Salesforce's journey to certified technical architect, which makes up a subset of the technical architects that you'll find in the wild. I think there's about 200 certified technical architects worldwide right now. So as a solution architect, I want to say that I love this pyramid. I think it's great, but it doesn't have some of my favorite certifications in it that I wish everybody would have. And those are going to be the Sales Cloud certification and the Service Cloud certification for the consulting. And then also the admin certification, which I think is listed up here as an optional, and the advanced admin. I feel like those certifications are really your bread and butter. And if you're just starting off in this journey, those give you the most exposure to the platform as a whole. However, I do love this pyramid. I'm 6 times certified, and I'm trying to climb my way up. It's just taking me a little while. Genevieve does have a different perspective, though.
So the Salesforce Certified Technical Architect is an extremely valuable thing to achieve, but you shouldn't consider it to be a blocker for your career. I have delivered many successful client projects in the enterprise consulting space as a technical architect, and I am not yet certified. It is something that I might pursue at some point, but the main takeaway here is that you don't need to get certified first before you can achieve your goal of becoming an architect and becoming a successful, trusted advisor to your clients.
So now that we've talked about the certification pyramid and the path that you could take, I think we should talk about our paths.
Sure. So I joined into the Salesforce ecosphere about 10 years ago. I came in as a developer with extensive web development background. So for me, it was actually a step up to become an admin. I had to learn how to do things declaratively with clicks, not code, in order to make sure I was using the platform as it's intended and make sure that my customers were getting the best solution. Over time, I grew to become a senior developer and ultimately a technical lead, responsible for coordinating and driving the success of the delivery of a project, both nationally and internationally. And eventually, I grew into becoming a technical architect in the enterprise consulting space. Again, it took me about 10 years to go through this whole journey. It involved a lot of reading, a ton of prototyping and spike solutions, certifications, trailheads, and also a lot of networking. But Shannon had a slightly different path to get here.
I did. So I'm a little less interesting. I went from admin to solution architect. I dipped my toe in the developer pool for a second, right? So I went from admin to developer to senior developer to tech lead to enterprise architect to solution architect. Overall, my journey was about 5 years, but we did a lot of the same things. So reading, prototyping, certifications, networking, and Trailhead. However, we network a little differently than what you might be thinking when you hear the word network. So I would love Genevieve to introduce you to Tea Time.
So a practice that was introduced to me by one of my mentors, and something I like to share with others, is the concept of tea time. Tea time is a casual, informal, practical method for developing deep and meaningful relationships with members of your business circle, your peers, your mentors, mentees. Whether they occur as regularly scheduled, recurring meetings on your calendar or ad hoc when you realize you haven't hung out for a while, the barrier to entry is extremely low. There's no agenda required, no prep work needed. You don't even need to have tea, though I recommend it. The idea is to give yourself a safe space and forum outside of normal project work, where you can share stories, ask questions, brainstorm solutions to particularly complex puzzles, ask questions, vent frustrations, be a little silly, basically anything. But the main point is to value yourself and your network enough time to give yourself the time to grow those relationships. Making the time and space to have those conversations definitely helped me to grow my career and to become a better architect. But even more valuable is that some of my best friendships grew out of having tea.
So, fun story. Genevieve totally used tea time on me. So we were on a project together. I was the tech lead, and she was a tech arc. And I got this random invite, and it was like tea time, ? And I was like, oh, crap. What did I do? So no, she asked me questions about myself and tried to get to know me and asked me where I wanted to go in my career. And so it was a really interesting conversation because I hadn't had one of those with a tech arc at my firm. And it became this place where I could ask questions from somebody who's gone through the things that I was trying to go through and had made it. And it became a really cool practice that I now take with with the people that I'm mentoring. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. And I thank you for that, Genevieve.
Thank you.
So now we've talked about tea time, maybe we want to tell them what they can do for their path.
So we mentioned a whole lot of different architects. The key is to find out what you are passionate about and what skills you need to do in order to grow to get yourself in a position to achieve that role.
So we talked about networking, but we do firmly believe in it. Who do you know in the role that you want to grow into? What can you learn from that person? And the most important thing, in my opinion, is giving back to that relationship. So find a mentor, but give back to your mentor. So if you hear of something interesting that you think they might like to know, make sure that you're keeping them included.
And don't give up. Becoming an architect takes time, and it should. There is so much to learn about the platform and how to work with other people. It will be a journey to get there. But as you come across issues, ask for help often, and remember, puzzles are solvable. Have hope.
So we've put supplies together for your journey to architect. And the most important one is to follow us on Twitter. I'm Hal Shannon. She's Escriel Tweets. Schedule tea time. And then what we'd like to do is, if we have questions as a group, that's fine. We'll open it up for a Q&A. But come to us for your Q&A. Because what I'd really like to do is, in lieu of a formal Q&A session, look to your left and to your right and have a tea time with the person sitting next to you. All right? Okay. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for joining us during lunch.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Dreamforce.